The Amazon. By far the largest tropical rainforest on the planet. Until the 20th century, it seemed untouched by man. But today, science is peeling back the canopy to reveal an untold history. One in which great tracts of the dense jungle were once farms, successfully managed by a huge and organized civilization. This new evidence suggests that legends of lost cities, like the mythical El Dorado, are based in truth. In 1542, Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana led an expedition into the Amazon in search of a lost civilization and its fabulous city of gold, El Dorado. Legends of this mythic place had grown since the Spanish first arrived in the early 1500s. But the expedition had no idea where to look, and the search turned to tragedy. Eight months into the expedition, half of the original command to find El Dorado was dead, and the rest were starving and dying from disease. Captain Orellana volunteered to lead an advance party to find food downriver. Nearly 60 conquistadors and a few slaves took the only boat, leaving the rest stranded and lost in the jungle. It was 600 miles downstream before they found food. It took 14 days to get there, and the weak, bedraggled men refused to row back upstream to deliver food to their command. So Orellana made the historic decision to continue downriver, where he calculated they would eventually meet the Atlantic Ocean. The Spanish captain had no way of knowing that it was around 3,000 miles away, and that it would take them 8 months in extreme conditions. But on their unplanned journey, Orellana claimed to have made one of the greatest discoveries in history. That the Amazon was teeming with a sophisticated civilization, living in large walled cities, managing the jungle like a farm. The Amazon from the air today bears little resemblance to a farm. This vast jungle floodplain is the size of the continental USA. Its rivers carry 1/5 of the world's fresh water and are home to over 1/3 of the Earth's known species. But there is almost no visible evidence of previous human habitation. Orthodox science maintains that flooding is too severe, and soils are too poor to sustain large populations. But scientists today are probing deeper into the jungle than ever before. They're unearthing evidence that is causing a revolution in the way we think about the history of the Amazon. These scientists believe that Amerindians are complex people, a civilization with a long and tumultuous history.
One of the basic questions of Amazonian archaeology is, can a lot of people live in a productive way in a tropical equatorial setting? That's the question that we're trying to ask and answer.
Some of the clues to this puzzle come from Orellana's journey and what he claims to have witnessed. We would never know the details of the incredible story if it were not for the writings of a Dominican priest. Father Gaspar de Carvajal kept a journal as the survivors drifted down the Amazon.
On New Year's Day, 1542, our companions heard Indian drums. Captain Orellana ordered the muskets and crossbows to be made ready.
As they drifted downstream, the wretched crew came under constant attack.
We passed by many villages where the Indians stood waiting for us, ready to fight.
In several battles, Carvajal claims they were confronted by armies of thousands.
The Indians rose up, more than 5,000 strong, armed, and they began to challenge us. Whenever the Indians were great in numbers, they formed a wall, and our firearms inflicted damage on them.
Carvajal reports that with just 3 firearms and 5 crossbows, the conquistadors survived countless attacks. While clashes with Indians came as no great surprise to scientists, the size of the tribal armies seemed implausible. As well as descriptions of battles, there are detailed passages of the people and customs of a huge indigenous population.
This is a temperate land and one of great productiveness. They are a people of very highly developed manners and customs.
The priest also records glimpses of even larger civilizations inland.
We could see fine highways leading inland, and at a distance of 3 miles, very large cities that glistened in white.
But this account was surrounded in controversy. Many suspected the chronicle to be fabricated, written solely to save the life of Captain Orellana. When the captain finally arrived back in Spain 2 years later, he learned that some of the original expedition had survived. Captain Orellana was accused of mutiny. Father Carvajal's journal was considered propaganda and remained unpublished for 300 years. When it was finally released to the public, the Amazon jungle was already considered uninhabitable by all but small nomadic tribes. Science completely ignored the journal's claim of large populations. But today, Eduardo Neves thinks that Carvajal's chronicle should be re-examined. He believes he has evidence that supports many of the priest's claims. Eduardo has concentrated his efforts around Manaus, capital of the vast state of Amazonas. When Professor Neves first visited this 100-acre fruit orchard, he noticed remnants of an ancient culture strewn all over the ground.
If you walk around here and we see all the spot shards in the surface of the site, the amount is really amazing.
For archaeologists, ceramic fragments are clear signs of human habitation.
E aí, Silvia, tudo em rima, alguma novidade aqui?
Olha o que a gente encontrou hoje.
Fragmento, paredão. Não, legal mesmo, hein?
The pottery offers the team important clues to the mystery of who lived here and when.
The work we've done so far here tells us that this place has been occupied on and off for more than 1,500 years, from before the time of Christ all the way to the time of the arrival of the Europeans here in this area in the early 16th century AD.
Eduardo estimates that at the time Orellana drifted by in 1542, this village was home to around 1,000 people. The ancient village is just one of over 100 Eduardo has discovered in the region.
I could spend the rest of my life digging only this site here. It's a 40-hectare site, but we have literally more than 100 sites in this area, 30 by 30 kilometer wide.
If the evidence collected by Professor Neves is accurate, it supports Carvajal's accounts of seeing large populations here. But orthodox science has always maintained the jungle couldn't sustain such numbers simply because there was not enough to eat. Now, Eduardo Neves thinks he's found the answer. The Satere Mawe are typical of contemporary Indian tribes. There are only 24 people here, including 9 children. Agriculture is difficult because Amazon's soil is notoriously acidic. The only crop they can grow is manioc, a staple of the Amazon, but one that is deficient in many nutrients. To supplement their diet, they must hunt. They fish using traditional methods of bow and arrow. In the forest, they hunt for small animals. Here, they fail to catch an armadillo. It is a labor-intensive method for feeding any population. Traditionally, scientists have pointed to this lack of food production as the reason large populations could not exist in the Amazon. But archaeologist Eduardo Neves begs to differ. He has new evidence indicating large human settlements have lived here for millennia.
The record of human occupation here in the central Amazon began around 9,000 years ago. Things get really intense here in this area from 2,500 years ago until the time of the arrival of the Europeans.
Such evidence matches what Captain Orellana and Father Carvajal reported seeing in 1542.
There were very large settlements, so numerous and so many inhabitants. We passed a very large and flourishing village, which extended for 6 miles.
Such large populations would have had to produce a lot of food to sustain themselves, a feat that scientists in the last century thought was impossible due to the acidic soil. Carvajal reports the crew often went without food on their 3,000-mile adventure. But in many passages, the priest details feasting on a variety of abundant foods.
Captain Orellana requested all the overlords come to him. And the next day, they came laden with food.
When the Indians were less willing to part with food, the conquistadors took it by force.
The conquistadors fought in such a way that they made the Indians take to flight. And so the village was left in our hands with the food that it possessed.
Killing for food allowed the starving Spaniards to eat, but it increased tension at each village as the conquistadors floated slowly downstream. Most scientists in the last century thought Carvajal's descriptions of plentiful food were pure fantasy. The red, acidic Amazonian soil is infertile for most human crops. But new science indicates that the ancient Indians had found a solution. They were making their own soil.
The soil is much better here than the average soil that we find in the Amazon. And the reason why the soil here is so good is because it's been created by human action in the past.
Below the lush crops, a thick blanket of black, fertile soil, 6 feet deep, covers the entire site. The soil, known as terra preta, is an unparalleled phenomenon. Infertile Amazonian soil has combined with tons of pot shards, fish bones, and charcoal. Most scientists believe that only humans could have produced it. Carbon dating the pottery shards tells Eduardo that the soil was made around 1,000 years ago. Initially, scientists were puzzled by the quantity of charcoal in the terra preta.
The amount of charcoal we find is really great, and we think that charcoal plays a very important role into holding the nutrients and releasing them, every other year, depending on the dry and the wet seasons.
Farmers around the world have used slash and burn methods to regenerate soil nutrients for centuries. But it appears the ancient Amazons used a different method. Partial burn, creating not ash, but charcoal. Terra preta is one of the most fertile and stable soils on the planet. After 1,000 years of tropical rainfall and scorching sun, the black earth still produces lush fruit trees with up to 3 harvests a year. Scientists have tried to understand the secret of this man-made soil since it was first discovered. But in modern times, no one, not even contemporary Indians, has found the combination of materials to successfully produce terra preta.
Nobody so far has really come close to replicating terra preta. That's still an open question, but we know they're very stable. After 1,000 years, they still keep their nutrients.
As well as being extremely fertile, the soil is also a natural preservative, used by the ancients as burial ground. Typically, the intense jungle humidity rots everything within weeks of being in the earth. But Eduardo has discovered 25 well-preserved human remains in the thick black dirt. Each one is roughly 1,000 years old.
The pH here is almost neutral. Terras pretas, the dark soils, are normally almost neutral on pH. And that really contributes to create a more stable environment, non-acidic environment for the preservation of these kinds of remains. The whole debate about Amazonian archaeology is how well the environment could support these people. What we found so far, like looking at the 25 burials that we excavated from here, is that these fellows, they're well off, they're very robust, they're like healthy individuals, no major signs of trauma, their teeth were in a very good shape. So the evidence that we have so far in terms of quality of life and health tell us that they were living well off. Olha que legal isso aqui, Carol, tá vendo? Isso aqui, você tem isso aqui é tipo Manacapuru aqui dentro.
At their laboratory, Professor Eduardo Neves and his team examine some of the ceramic fragments. While tons of pot shards have been collected, some complete pots have been found intact. Others have been reconstructed to reveal their former beauty.
So if you look at this pottery, we realize that this is very sophisticated artwork. We can tell without any margin of error that whoever did it was spending a lot of time and energy in the production of these vessels.
Some of it, found near the Amazon Delta, is stunning by any standard. In 1542, Father Carvajal described seeing beautiful pottery.
There was a great deal of very large porcelain jars and pitchers, of the best ever seen in the world. Even the porcelain of Malaga is not its equal.
But what of the priests' claim of even bigger civilizations inland? The vast interior of the Amazon remained unexplored until quite recently. Rumors of lost cities deep in the jungle persisted well into the 20th century. In 1925, British explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett led an expedition into an uncharted region of the Brazilian Amazon to find what he called the lost city of Z. He imagined Z to be like Atlantis, an epic stone city partially destroyed by earthquakes.
It is certain that amazing ruins of an ancient city, older than those in Egypt, exist in the far interior.
Just 14 years earlier, the Incas' fabled lost city, Machu Picchu, was discovered, high in the Andes above the Amazon. Legends of lost cities deep inland, like those Orellana had reported, fascinated Percy Fawcett. The British colonel became convinced Z was hidden in the unexplored regions of the southern Amazon, the Mato Grosso. Fawcett's focus was somewhere beyond the headland of the Xingu River. To not appear as aggressors, the colonel traveled in a small group. That included his son Jack and Jack's friend Raleigh Rimmel.
To Jack's great delight, we encountered the first of the wild Indians here, naked savages from the Xingu.
At first, there seemed little evidence of the inland civilization that Captain Orellana glimpsed. But as the expedition continued further into the jungle, Fawcett met tribes that impressed him greatly. He was fascinated by their legends, more clues that might lead him to Z.
The whole of this region is saturated with Indian traditions of a most interesting kind, and which suggests the prior presence of a once great civilization.
Was this once great civilization the same that Orellana had referred to back in 1542? It's said the Kikuru were one of the last tribes to see Colonel Fawcett alive. They're the largest tribe of an ethnic group known as Xinguano. The Xingu Indigenous Park is the last outpost for traditional cultures like the Kikuru. The protected area is 10,000 square miles and home to 4,000 Indians from 14 tribes. Living far from the Amazon River and European influence has helped these people preserve the lands and traditions of their ancient ancestors. The village chief, Afukaka, explains what the tribe knows about the tall British colonel, Percy Fawcett. Today, the Kikuru are preparing for a wrestling competition with neighboring tribes. In this form, the sport is less than 100 years old, but its origins are believed to be ancient. These direct links with the Kikuru's past are what first brought archaeologist Professor Michael Heckenberger to the region.
This is pretty much the only place in the Amazon, in the Americas, where you see this continuity between the prehistoric or pre-Columbian past and present-day communities.
Heckenberger first arrived here in 1993 and has been studying the Kikuru and their past ever since.
Communities along the Amazon that the early chroniclers like Orellana and Carvajal saw are similar in some respects to Xinguano communities. They were oriented around large central plazas. Public ritual was an important organizing principle of their political structure.
Michael explains, in a typical Xinguano community, homes surround the civic center in a perfect circle. The circle is oriented east to west according to the summer solstice.
This is the chief's house. It's at the exact southern edge of the village, which means the long axis of this house is exactly east to west, just as the formal path is east to west. So when the chief is sleeping at night, his hammock is oriented east to west, which is precisely the way chiefs are buried for the formal chiefly funeral ritual.
Like his ancient ancestors, Chief Afukaka tells the Kikuru origin story in the village center.
One of the critical features of any civilization are its religious beliefs, and this religion may be as old as Christianity or Islam. It goes back probably to the time when the Xinguanu people first entered the region.
Scientists have put that date at somewhere between the time of Christ and 500 AD. It's quite possible that Colonel Fawcett listened to these same stories back in 1925. Fawcett was fascinated by Indian stories and took their legends seriously in his quest to find Z.
The city, said the Indians, had low stone buildings with many streets. But there are also some big buildings and a great temple.
Percy Fawcett came into the Upper Xingu looking for a very specific thing. European cities, stone architectures, temples, what most people are accustomed to seeing when they think of lost civilizations.
Colonel Fawcett's grim determination to find Z bordered on insanity. His secret route was cobbled together from dubious sources, including an inscribed stone obelisk and a psychic. Professor Heckenberger thinks the British colonel was chasing shadows, and the real city of Z was much closer than Fawcett had ever imagined. In 1993, Michael Heckenberger made a remarkable discovery. It might prove to be the key to finding the Amazon's lost cities. Less than a mile from the Kikuru village, Michael was taken to a large ditch. Pottery shards found mixed in the soil confirmed that this was man-made.
We know for certain, because this ceramic is here, this is not natural soil. This is fill that was thrown in, and it just is one more bit of evidence that demonstrates that these are excavated features. They're man-made features.
The archaeology professor was convinced he knew what the pit had been used for.
One of the basic differences between the contemporary communities and the pre-Columbian communities is the ancient communities built big walls around their settlements. This is part of one of those walls.
It was the first evidence Heckenberger had found of a prehistoric settlement here. And it would become the roadmap for future discoveries.
Our archaeological excavation cut across one of the ancient ditches, and in the base of the ditch, they would have placed big tree trunks to form a palisade wall. We don't know exactly how tall the wall was. It was a substantial wall, but if you can imagine a wall that extended for a mile around the entire central portions of the community.
The fortified village was 15 times larger than a modern Kikuru village.
The Kikuru village is the largest community amongst contemporary Xinguanu people. It's a very large village in the contemporary system. But actually, in pre-Columbian times, it would have been a small village.
In the 16th century, Father Carvajal reported seeing large walled communities.
This village was fortified with a wall of heavy timbers.
We know in this part of the Amazon, there was significant warfare between different indigenous groups. And so defense is one obvious function, but it also seems that these monumental structures were part of the way that the ancient Xinguanu communities divided up their space.
As well as fortified walls, Carvajal also claimed to have seen fine highways leading inland. On one occasion, his captain, Francisco de Orellana, dared to travel on one of these roads.
From the village, there were many fine highways that led inland. The captain wished to find out where they led. He had not gone a mile when the roads became like royal highways.
The idea of royal highways in the jungle seems unlikely. But today, the Kikurus still boast a beautifully maintained straight road 3 lanes wide.
These were roads that were supersized for kind of ritual grandeur, to create a monumental effect for major community ceremonies. This road, which is the formal entryway into the village, which is oriented east and west, it appears that it doesn't go anywhere, but in fact, if you follow this out, it connects up with other villages. In pre-Columbian times, 500 years ago, when there was many more villages in this area, if you went 3 or 4 kilometers or a couple of miles away from this community, you'd run directly into another community.
Again, Carvajal's record was accurate and adds weight to a growing theory that the chronicle has been unfairly ignored. The idea of finding lost stone cities in the Amazon suddenly seemed possible. Colonel Percy Fawcett was also convinced that there was a lost civilization deep inland. His exact route is unknown, as the colonel kept it secret so they could not be followed.
If we should not come out, I don't want rescue parties to come in looking for us. It's too risky.
The last reports that Fawcett made suggested that the expedition was not going well. Their mules were starving. The Brazilian guides and native porters had left. And Raleigh had become lame from an infected bite. Percy Fawcett's small expedition team traveled deeper inland, driven by the colonel's obsession to find an ancient stone city.
The answer to the enigma of ancient South America may be found when those old cities are located and opened up to scientific research. That the cities exist, I know.
Professor Heckenberger thinks Fawcett's search for stone cities in the Amazon had a fatal flaw. There's no stone here.
Basically, civilizations have to work with the materials that are available to them. And in this part of the world, in the Amazon, stone, or at least stone that you can do masonry from, is pretty uncommon. And so it's not likely that people would build structures out of stone. Percy Fawcett came to the Amazon looking for stone buildings, stone temples, cobbled streets, an alphabetic writing system. He was not expecting to find other types of urbanism.
Michael Heckenberger, however, was convinced that he would find a lost civilization here in the Kikuru homelands. He started to map the larger ancient village. He discovered the remnants of houses built in exactly the same style and orientation as the Kikuru homes are today.
First, they have the central plaza, circular plaza, with the men's house and cemetery in the center, but they always have a formal roadway that leads into the village, and that always goes to the east or west of the community. One of the fascinating things about the ancestors of the Kwikuru, or the Xinguanos, the pre-Columbian villages, is this system of orientations actually extended across the entire region. So this community would be connected to other large settlements according to these same orientations of east and west, north and south.
As Heckenberger extended his research, he started to see an incredible pattern. There was evidence of a vast, connected civilization that had lived here for millennia. But if Heckenberger is right, what happened to this lost civilization? Michael Heckenberger has continued to map ancient sites across the Xingu region.
Once we had the communities mapped throughout the entire region, we saw that they all fit together. They were all connected, and that this pattern extends across the entire Upper Xingu Basin.
The network of prehistoric villages extended across an area the size of Belgium. This matrix of settlements, Heckenberger believes, can be defined as sprawling cities.
In one sense, the ancient Kwikuru cities or complex settlement patterns are more like Los Angeles than New York City. New York City has a very defined core that's very vertical in orientation. Los Angeles, it's kind of hard to figure out where the core is. It seems to be spread out. It's more of a networked community with multiple centers. These ancient Kwikuru settlement patterns were just like that. They were multi-centric.
Were these large, connected centers what Carvajal meant when he talked about cities? The Dominican priest described a number of the cities as gleaming white, which seems at odds with the straw huts found in the Kikuru village. Scientists believe that many of the homes in ancient times were made of wattle and daub, made from Amazon mud. When the mud dries, it turns white. In the brilliant Amazon sunshine, Carvajal may indeed have seen these cities gleaming white. Gaspar de Carvajal's descriptions of walled cities, wide highways, and large civilizations match new scientific evidence. Eduardo Neves and others working across the Amazon basin have found the man-made terra preta in vast quantities. If combined, the black soil would cover an area the size of France. Some scientists estimate the population of the Amazon prior to the arrival of Europeans was in the millions. But today, there are only 350,000 Amerindians across the entire Amazon basin. So what happened to them all? Why was Carvajal the only one to see such things? Many scientists are now convinced that disease brought by Europeans caused one of the greatest plagues in history.
My point of view is that it disappeared because the diseases, they had no immunity against influenza, against smallpox, lots of diseases brought up from Europe by the Portuguese that came here.
Epidemics would have spread quickly along the Amazon. Some experts believe disease killed up to 95% of the indigenous population. The few who survived were forced into a semi-nomadic existence. The jungle quickly reclaimed the abandoned villages that had once teemed with people. By the time Percy Fawcett arrived here, there was almost nothing left of the ancient Indian cities. The colonel had little interest in native villages. The last words that Percy Fawcett wrote appear in a letter to his wife.
I expect to be at the main objective in August. Thereafter, our fate is in the lap of the gods. You need have no fear of any failure.
We're never going to find stone cities in the Amazon. But if we open our mind, let our imaginations, and conceive of this community bigger, before there was depopulation, before the destruction that was created by European colonialism, perhaps this is the lost city of Z.
Unraveling the mystery of the ancient Amazon has only just begun. Scientists are confident that it will reveal much about managing the jungle.
If you look at the way these people were handling the environment, the way they're modifying it and making it more productive without destroying it, then we have a clue to sophistication. They were able to do things when they lived here in a much better way than we're doing now. So in that sense, they were more sophisticated than we are.
Studies are underway to find the secret formula for producing terra preta. The soil could potentially be introduced across vast arid regions of the world. But now, just as the extent of the ancient Indian nation and the wealth of indigenous knowledge becomes clearer, it seems the world is in danger of losing them altogether. Deforestation is tearing down an area the size of a football field every 10 seconds. But the agriculture replacing it is not sustainable.
There's no good soil holding the forest together. So deforestation and cattle ranching can lead to that. There's money in the short run with the timber or with the cattle, but after a while, the soil cannot even keep the pasture anymore unless one keeps on adding nutrients to the pasture, what makes it become very expensive.
Even in the protected lands of the Xingu, the future of tribes like the Kikuru hangs in the balance. Fossil-based fertilizers are seeping into the rivers, turning them green and poisoning the fish.
Bahaji ko tehinyal he ko hati sakiti lati hainte tunga pega ko ipana le
tu ko ngaki kita di soto tu te hachi kanga tu te di soto.
Only one clean river remains, and even that is threatened unless the Kikuru can buy the land around the headwaters.
Bahaji kumengila so ko kihan ko inte kanga chu je te mai la nya hole se ti po nge le ngoi hole te mai la nya ti ko pe nge le ngoi le ko ji che hwe soi ya ko nyen.
Now, people like Michael Heckenberger are campaigning to help the Kikuru buy this land. In the hope that a unique and incredible people will survive intact with all their traditions for another 1,000 years.